In today's episode, we are thrilled to bring you an inspiring story of resilience and adaptability. Our guest is a British mother who spent over 12 years with her child and her husband living abroad before returning to the UK. She's also the founder of the expatchild.com, host of the podcast Expatability Chat Podcast, and also the founder of the Expatability Club. Please join me welcoming Carole Hallet Mobbs.
This is Expat Experts, the podcast that dives into the fascinating lives of those who've lived and worked across borders, exploring the challenges, experiences, and insights they've gained along the way.
Before we dive into today's episode, I want to remind all our listeners that the best way to stay tuned with our latest episodes is to hit the subscribe button in YouTube or in your favorite audio platforms. For extra content and exclusive ways of seeing how the podcast is produced, but also one-on-one calls on how to create your own podcast, YouTube channel, or navigating the life as an expat, please visit our website, expatexpertspodcast.com, or check the link in the description.
The Expat, Carole Hallet Mobbs.
Let's start with it because I suppose you have a lot of stories to tell.
Well, I'm not a baby, so yes, I've got a lot of life behind me. But yeah, we moved overseas in 2006 and we moved to Japan in Tokyo. And my daughter was 5 years old, just turned 5 years old at the time. And my husband got a job over there. And so we moved for what was going to be 4 years and turned out to be about 5.
Wow. I met worse than people who decided to be like 4 months somewhere and stayed for life. So.
Oh, yes, very much so. That comes over, usually they're moving overseas for love. Or they've moved overseas and then they fall in love and then they stay. But we always knew that it was going to be a posting with an end date. We were lucky to be able to push the end date a little bit. So
was it with the final date due to the fact of a contract with your husband, or you knew that it was a temporary?
Yeah, we always knew that it was a temporary posting. We expected to come back to the UK after that, but we then got Berlin in Germany, and then from Berlin unexpectedly got an offer in South Africa. And then they realised that he hadn't been home for 12 years and said, that's it, you've got to come back. So we moved back to the UK in 2018 into the coldest winter that they've had for a long time from summer in South Africa. So that was a bit of a shock.
Okay, crazy. And in all of that, you had children. So you just said like you had your daughter already in the first move. So she was already 5 years old.
She was 5. I've only got the one. She's more than enough. But yeah, she'd literally only done 1 term of schooling here in the UK. So it was pretty easy to move a 5-year-old to another country. But then when you move a kid of, from about the age of 8, 9, 10, it gets more difficult. And then you get a teenager and, well.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I suppose the move to Japan for her was probably more like a cultural shock than a thing like, for all of you probably, because the cultures they are very different.
No, intriguingly, the move to Japan was actually the easiest. And I know a lot of it is because we're expecting it to be incredibly culturally different. So we are expecting culture shock. And over the years that I've worked in what I call the expatosphere, I've realised that culture shock isn't actually a thing. It's moments, little snapshots of time. Take going to China, for example. That can be a bit of a culture shock because you'll walk around the corner and find yourself in the middle of a live market. And that, for a Westerner, is quite a shock. But in Japan, you're expecting something different. And boy, do you get it. It is an incredible place. I mean, I'll go for a walk, take the dog for a walk in Japan, and I'll see somebody taking their monkey for a walk. Or they've got a rabbit in a baby sling. Or they're pushing a pushchair full of doggies with clothes on and sunglasses. So, yeah, my life revolves around animals and wildlife. I do go off on little side quests about animals, so pull me back in. So yeah, it's little
I love
moments
it also.
it's little
I
moments.
know you moved with pets also, and I will ask you about that also afterwards because I've been there. Not
Yeah,
always easy.
yeah. I think it's probably easier with pets than it is with kids.
I suppose they don't have that much of like, I don't know, how did you feel it with your daughter, but the fact that you say, okay, the first move with 5 years old was the easy one.
Yeah,
That's probably also because the circle of friends, the whole fact of learning a language or living something that they call home, no, at that point of time with 5, home are your parents.
yeah,
With
exactly.
15, home are your friends. No, probably like that's the main difference at that point.
Yeah, it starts changing at about the age of 8, 9, 10. And that's when they move away from mum and dad as being their entire life and recognizing that they quite like these other people that aren't you. And also it's to do with proportions. So we moved at when she was 5. Her conscious memory, if you like, of the UK wasn't that much. But she spent 5 years in Japan at a very core age, between 5 and 10. So she'll remember a lot more of Japan than she did of the UK at the time. And
Yeah,
it sort of grows in proportion. So it's
yeah, of
down
course.
to the very first time you move, really.
What about language wise? Like you went to a very difficult one. I mean, you went from a very difficult one to another difficult one to another difficult one, probably. No, like I mean, South Africa, it's not one, it's a lot of languages depending on where you live in South Africa. So it's
It
even
is,
more.
but let's be honest, everybody speaks English.
Okay. What about
You
Japan? How
they
how
do.
how was the yeah.
Well, we had about a year's notice before we moved.
Mhm.
But I actually was running my own business. I ran a publishing company before we moved. So I didn't actually have time to learn the language because I was too busy doing it was a magazine, hard copy magazine, and also then selling it because I needed to sell it before I moved.
Mm.
So it was about 2 nights, I think, before we caught the flight to Japan that I actually watched a program on television about the geisha of Kyoto. And of course, it was in Japanese with subtitles. And oh my goodness, I can't even pick out a syllable. I can't understand a word. This is going to be interesting. But once you're in the country and you're surrounded by the sounds and I put the radio on in the car, for example. I always listen to the local radios, and you start being able to separate syllables. I am no linguist. I'm from the UK. We don't start language training until we're 11. So it's very hard for an adult of my generation. Daughter was speaking sentences in Japanese within about a month of starting school. So,
Not bad.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's also one of the advantages, I suppose, when they're kids. Like they
Yeah, they just
sorry
absorb and
about
they
that.
don't have the
Yeah.
self-consciousness that we have. They don't mind using the pronunciation, and mimicking, if you like. But
Mm.
as an adult,
They
we
don't
can't.
have also the stigma, no? On yeah, I'm
Yeah,
saying it wrong, I'm not doing this, or I'm mocking, or I feel like I'm mocking the language in front of them.
exactly. Yeah, so it is easier for a child, and they pick it up. And I've got a feeling that once they've got one language, it sort of opens up the neurons in the brain to quickly pick up other languages. I've got friends who speak 7, 8, 9 languages. I can barely get by in
Mm.
English. So, but
Yeah,
my
I suppose that's always like when you start opening a little bit of like the doors to other things, you start realizing. I have a very weird experience with this, and it's just like German helps you to learn Greek. This is something that you would never consider, for example, and that's because the grammatic of both languages are the same.
ah,
So it happens, of course. Like as more languages you add to your repertoire, let's say like this, the easiest is to learn other new ones, or at least I feel like that. What
I
about
think you do, and I
school-wise?
think. Sorry.
For school-wise, like your daughter went into like English school, or was she starting in Japanese school
No,
suddenly?
no. I don't personally believe in dropping a child into a mono-language school. If
Mm.
well, for lots and lots of reasons, but because we thought we knew we were only going to be there for a set number of years and she would be moving back to the UK, we kept her in the British educational system, so British International School. And as I say, things my crystal ball didn't work. So, but yeah, so they did language and a lot of cultural lessons in school, but it was taught in English. And
Okay.
yeah, so
Yeah, makes sense. It's also something that I also get quite often. No, when you have an end date and you have like a date limit, you also, I don't know, you take things different from a different perspective. You don't fully immerse from days one on like, oh, I need to be here forever. No, so
yeah,
how much did you feel that you entered the Japanese culture? How much did you end being in it?
well, I recognise that Japanese is a very pure culture, and looking as I do, I can never be fully immersed. I can't be Japanese, apart from the fact I'm 6 foot tall. They would direct me to the men's department if I wanted shoes. So you're never quite sure how to take me. But I recognise that it doesn't matter if I wear full kimono to school and speak Japanese like a native. I can still never be Japanese. And mind you, it's the same in some villages here in the UK. If your great-grandparents weren't born in that same house, you're still an outsider. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it is a very different lifestyle when you know that you'll be moving on. And for some people, it means that they will stay in their expat bubble and they will only mix with people of their own nationality. And they won't even venture to even try local food, for example. They will only have the McDonald's. Or it's a bit like people who go on holiday to an all-inclusive resort.
Yeah.
And I don't
Sounds
understand.
familiar,
Yeah, I
I don't
don't
get it either.
understand them. So it's quite difficult. I try and get into the minds of other people, but there are some I can't do.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, at the same time, like you really go to Japan and you don't try the local food. Like this is like, I don't know. You've been like probably eating sushi that it doesn't resemble any close to real sushi in Japan for quite a long time. So,
Yeah, I'm
how
forever
was that?
disappointed. I'm forever
Is real?
disappointed at English.
I can get it. It is really different. Like you notice, like it is a complete different world food wise, or what?
Yeah, absolutely. Fish, I don't know. You know, I know a lot of animals and birds and wildlife and a few fish, but there are fish that appear in a sushi and sashimi restaurant that I don't have a clue about. But I would try anything once. I went to a sushi bar. A Japanese friend of mine took me to a behind-the-scenes sushi bar, one that wasn't for tourists. They were very surprised to see me there. And I just pointed something at random and was that he said to my friend, "Is she sure she wants that? Are you sure?" Yeah, because she would like to dare me to eat stuff. Yeah, give that to her, that's fine. It wasn't the nicest, it was very rich. And then she told me it was whale.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah, but there we go.
Well,
It was.
yeah.
But then
Sometimes,
she
no.
would invite me for breakfast and offer me baby octopus food. So yeah, she was always
Okay.
daring me.
What about the amount of people? This is something that I always don't know how I would deal with because you lived in Tokyo, like the city itself,
Yeah.
it's a very populated, dense city. Like, how did you deal with and cope with
It didn't bother me in the slightest because I used to live in London. And yeah,
Okay.
and also being that much over everybody, even in London, it's easier for me. I'm not stuck in somebody's armpit on the tube. But yeah, I didn't personally notice that it was overly busy.
Mm,
It was, yeah, it was just a city as far as I'm concerned, and it wasn't crazy like Beijing. Beijing crossing the road feels scary, but Japan, their whole ethos is respect for others. So you never
okay.
felt barged or, it was a very calm place. I found it incredible.
Nice. When does it comes the move to Berlin? I think I read in the website, or I heard in your podcast about the earthquake in 2011, and
Yeah,
that being a little
20.
bit the trigger.
It wasn't the trigger. We were supposed to go the previous year, got an
Mm,
extension. I think we were supposed to go the previous November, but for schooling reasons, they gave us an extension. So we were due to leave in the April of 2011. And then, of course, on March the 11th was the 9 magnitude earthquake. So we didn't leave because of the earthquake, but it did make leaving so much harder for
mm,
logistical reasons and, frankly, mental health reasons. We didn't have a time to say goodbye to anybody. We wanted to leave, but we didn't want to leave, and a fair amount of PTSD as well.
mm,
So, yeah, the lead up to leaving Japan was really tough on my daughter, regardless of the earthquake, because she was at that age then. We were moving somewhere that she'd never been before. I'd never been before, but I'm an adult. I can see into the future and I can understand concepts, but children cannot. They can
mm.
only reference something based on their little experiences of the past. So it was a difficult move anyway. And then the earthquake made it just absolutely impossible to deal with. So but we finally got out and we landed in Berlin. I think it was about 2:00 in the morning eventually. And
Okay.
and then
Good.
that was it. Yeah. And that was a
It was
culture.
also Berlin.
Mm.
I mean, I
Well,
get it
because I
also.
look German, apparently. So
You
therefore,
what?
everyone expected me to speak fluent German.
Uh,
Failed my O-level, my GCSE German, but because I apparently look German, I was expected to understand all the rules and everybody. So that
mm,
when you see lots of people that look like you in a country that you kind of assume is going to be similar to Western Europe all over, yeah, it's not.
and especially Berlin, it's a whole case on its own, I think. Like, I mean, if you would go now, probably they will speak you more in English than in German. But
Mm.
I think this is like gentrification of the whole city is happening very fast. But in that case, like, what shocked you the most when you arrived to Berlin? I mean, besides the whole shock that you were having from the move from Japan and the situation that it was giving back, do you remember anything that you say, oh, okay, I remember that point from when I arrived to Berlin?
Not so much. We were kind of tangled up in a load of school issues.
Mm,
Trying to choose a school from the other side of the world where you can't go and visit is really tough. So we put her into a school and the other thing is we don't know where we're going to live until we get there. So we don't get to choose where we live. We're just given this is where you live. And it was
okay.
miles away from her school. And her school ended up being just 10 children in the entire year. Beautiful school, beautiful grounds, but 10
Okay.
kids who had all been there from the age of 6. So that wasn't great. And none of them
Mm,
spoke English, even though they'd been at this international school for very long. And then so we arrived in April, and by June, we had found out accidentally that the school was turning into a government-run school where they do half the lessons in German and half in English. So daughter was already struggling, and we had a whole year of major school issues. So that's kind of where my brain was when we first arrived in Berlin.
Makes sense.
And it didn't really get any better.
Yeah. German education system, it's
yeah, they needed funding from the government, so had to run by their rules, which was half and half bilingual school.
How many years did you spend then in Germany?
Just 2.
Or was it 2 years?
Just 2 years, because then my husband was asked to go and run South Africa. So everybody else was saying, no, you can't go to South Africa, it's too dangerous. And I'm going, go. Just go.
Was it this time a little bit easier for all of you? Like if the situation in Berlin wasn't the exact thing that you had in mind, and the schooling problems, the language not being, so maybe you are not fitting as much as you fitted in Japan, for example, as far as you're saying.
Well, Germany it wasn't so much the fitting in; it was impossible to find friends and a social network for me. In Japan, because expats are visible, we can't disguise ourselves. And when the kids are smaller, you all meet up at the school gates. When they get older, you don't have that school gate thing. So it was very, very difficult for me to find a social group. But by then, internet had sort of, social media had started. So, all my friends live on my computer. Hello, people.
What about the pets? That's something that I skipped in Japan, but I know that you moved already to Japan with pets. You moved to Germany with more pets, even?
Yeah, so we moved from the UK to Japan with 2 young boy cats. Sadly, one of them died within a week of arriving, which was awful. And then Raimi, the tabby cat, came with us basically until we almost left. But then we got a puppy in Japan. So she's our Japanese Shiba Inu. She's the Japanese national dog, and she's our souvenir from Japan. Oh goodness. Okay. So yeah, one of the cats.
I have 2.
The unexpected ones. This will be interesting. Yeah, so Raimi and Kita, the dog, then came to Germany. And then from Germany, we went to South Africa. And Raimi eventually, sadly, died. And ended up getting a couple of rescue cats, Git and Sumi. And yes, he's called Git. And you'll probably see why in a moment. And then we all came back to the UK, where we introduced South African cats to British winter. The dog thought it was amazing. She's not too good with heat. And then we acquired another cat since we've been back. So,
Nice.
So yeah.
How about the bureaucracy around moving so many animals between so many countries? Because I moved 2 cats from Germany to Greece, but it's 2 countries inside of the European Union. It's pretty straightforward. Vaccinations, a pet passport, European passport, and then suddenly you can fly with them.
Yeah,
and that's it.
we moved before Brexit took over. So we got back into the UK in 2018. You basically have to be very logistical, very strategic, and know exactly when the vaccinations need to be done, and preferably get somebody else to deal with it all for you. The one thing that bothered me in Germany was how early they start, and I had to go and find the government vet at 6:30 in the morning to get a stamp on the dog's papers. And of course, coming back into the UK is always tough because of the rabies laws. But it was straightforward enough. It was we did pay for somebody to collect them at the airport and drive them to our home. which made all the difference. Because apparently there was a paperwork issue that they dealt with at 4:00 in the morning on our behalf. So we had no idea until they all arrived. But as soon as they arrive, it's home. A house is a home.
Oh, nice.
So,
what about the adaptation for them? Because that's also something.
Doing stuff down there.
You said two South African cats arriving to the winter in Britain. Yeah. I suppose it's also periods of adaptation for animals can be long. Also, they deal with all different things. They settle
pretty quickly. Sumi is a tabby. She's usually the one that comes to join in. She's actually half African wildcat because they don't mind who they get together with. The other one is, I think, a Russian blue. I'm not sure. He was found in a hedge at 2 days old, so he doesn't know what he is. But they've settled in really well, and the dog loves the cooler weather. Well, I say cooler on the hot day, but it's well worth it.
What about coming back to the moment that your husband got asked to go to Africa, to South Africa? How did you deal with that? Another change after 2 years, another move.
No, I was fine with that. I couldn't wait to get out of Germany, and Africa's been a childhood dream. I wanted to when I wanted to go and live in Kenya and work with lions. Never quite made it somehow. Ended up with a mortgage and an office job. But so Africa for me, absolute dream, the wildlife. And it was incredible. And, it's sad to leave. It's one of the countries that it's got the nicest people. The people are amazing. Love the South Africans. So.
You said, though, that the people around you were telling you, it's a dangerous country. Did you felt that it was a dangerous country at the point of time?
Yeah, it is dangerous. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's, it has a lot of issues. And I think because I am fairly aware anyway, and I lived in a very dodgy place in London for a while, and it all made sense, the sort of streetwise stuff with an extra level of, don't stop at the traffic lights. And driving is hysterical. Getting out of driving African style, now I'm back in the UK, is proving a bit tricky, even though I've been back a long time. Oh God, roundabouts, be good. So it is a dangerous place, but you're given training and you kind of keep your finger on the pulse as to what's going on and be aware. Don't just wander around with your phone in your hand looking like a lost tourist, and you can be fine.
I assume it happened a little bit of also Japan at that point. Where did you live in South Africa exactly? Like
Pretoria.
Where were you?
In Pretoria, yeah.
Did it had also the component that you were saying about Japan of like you being too tall, too blonde, too anything like at the point of time? I think South Africa is a little bit more mixtured right now, but
I'm South Africa is one of the few places I can buy clothes in a normal shop that fit me. Germany being another one.
Germany, it's too early. They open too early for going for shopping, and they close too early. So
and they close on Saturday afternoons and Sundays. That was weird.
Yes,
that was very weird. Yeah, but the cafe and kuchen is good.
Yeah, that's true. Like everything that it's related with cakes and sitting in a table to have a coffee or a tea with cakes at 6 p.m. Or 5 p.m. No, 6 p.m. It's dinner time already. No, 4 p.m.
No, I like that.
What about South Africa? Traditions, things that you like. How long did you live there? Did you manage to adapt to culturally to do things in a? I mean, you said that they train you a little bit and you do things in a special way, but that's more for a protective perspective. But Did you manage to?
Anti-hijacking lessons
Uh,
kind of leave you feeling this weird mix of terrified but empowered, and sort of half hoping that someone will come and have a go at you so you can hit them. But no, unfortunately, we ended up living on a compound. I mean, everybody lives on a compound anyway, but we lived on an office compound. So I did not like that. But I joined in various art classes and such. So I got to meet some wonderful people and have decent conversations. But yeah, you're a little bit trapped. When we first arrived, the first day that we arrived, husband was whisked off by the office, and it wasn't like they'd been waiting days for him to arrive. We arrived when we were supposed to arrive, and I was completely ignored. Kind of used to that, but nobody had got us any food in. Nobody had got us any tea, coffee, milk, and you cannot go. You can't just walk to a shop. You can't walk anywhere, and there is no public transport. So. Didn't have a car. How am I going to get food? I had to go around the estate knocking on doors to try and find somebody just to go and get some milk and food. So, so I didn't like living on that particular area, but the whole of living in Africa more than made up for it. As long as I could get my weekend away on a safari, I was happy.
Nice. How old was your daughter back in the time of this last move before going back home?
You're going to make me do math. I work in years, I don't work in ages. So we moved in 2013 to Africa. So she was 12. And then we moved back to the UK in 2018. So she was she was about 16 when we moved back to the UK. And,
so she grew up as a teenager in South Africa then.
It's a real shame because in Japan, there's a lot of safety and a lot of freedom, but she was too young to have that. And then in Germany, a little bit more freedom, but not quite so safe. And then when she was ready for the freedom and the independence, can't do it because Africa. She still managed to be a teenager. It's okay.
Cool.
They have Uber over there.
A lot of taxis. You said in a moment, I think I understood that you found an office job in South Africa. All these years you work. Then I get it wrong. Like you didn't work these years that you were abroad then, or you were doing your own projects.
I work for myself. I've been self-employed for exactly 30 years. So I just did different things. Yes, I know. I only look 32. It's fine. No, I used to work in the City of London till 1994. So I've always found my own work. I used to be a freelance writer in Japan, and then we're going to go into the whole story of expat child and stuff. But
let's keep that for the second part, and let me do a couple of last questions then for your expat life. I do a last recommendation section, but before that, I wanted to ask you about the moment of going back from 12 years of living abroad back home. How was that move? I think a lot of people struggles with the repatriation and going back to a place that you called home for so many years, but it's not exactly the home that you left.
Oh, it was a lot. It was, and because I've seen it from, if you like, an academic side with my work with other expats, but also from my own side, it was hard because I didn't want to come back. I knew I had to. So that whole "it is what it is" can't be helped. It's the way that it has to be. But there are a lot of people who are desperately homesick when they're overseas and they want to come home. And they either come home expecting it to be the same as when they left, and it never is, and you never are the same, or they are so desperate to come back because they have loathed where they've been living, then everything about moving back is brilliant and happy. And yeah, so I didn't want to come back. I had to come back. I'm very good at just sort of dealing with whatever life throws at me. But it was still hard. I actually woke up about a week after I got back home. And the first thought when I woke up was, I want to go home now. Well, hang on a minute, where's home? And had a whole day of, what the hell was that all about? But the other thing that I think makes a big difference is how long you've lived in your country before you move. If you move at the age of 20, 21, and then move back when you're, say, 35, 40, that's going to be a big change, because the amount of change that you go through as a person, I'd already settled, I was already fully British. So, it wasn't such a major deal. It was still bloody hard. It was still really hard. So, and I just sort of got used to it all, and then COVID struck. So that was fun.
Yeah, of course. I completely forgot about that. No.
Sorry. It made a lot of big difference. It made a lot of difference to the life of everybody.
Definitely. Everything changed, of course. What about your daughter? Like, because for her, maybe it wasn't like that much. Like, for her, maybe it was like moving to a complete new country. She probably knew that she was from there, but she didn't remind too much about her first 5 years of life.
No, it wasn't home to her, but she settled incredibly quickly. And she wasn't able to go to school. The British school system's kind of annoying in that they're not very flexible. So she was actually out of school for a year before starting college. So it wasn't the easiest arrival. And as I say, we got back at the beginning of 2018. She started college late in 2018, did all of 2019, and then COVID. So so it wasn't really a normal return, I think.
Definitely not. I mean, I think anyone who has moved just before pandemic or during pandemic has noticed that, I don't know, I lived 4 years in Germany, but I need to take out 2 of them mainly because of COVID.
Yeah, I know that South Africa had a really, really rough COVID because you couldn't even leave your house.
Maybe it was good that you were in UK at that point of time already because of that.
Yeah. I mean, it worked out, and it is what it is, and I will keep saying that, because sometimes there's no point in looking back. As I say, looking back, you're not going that way. You have to not necessarily accept your lot. You can make it better, but there's no good wishing for a previous life. If you wish for it that badly, then go and make it happen. Otherwise,
actually. I wanted to ask you a last question before I do the recommendations part. It's something that I normally ask the other way around. I ask people who are living abroad, are you thinking to go back home at that point of, are you thinking of moving away from home again at some point of time?
No, absolutely not. And people find that very, very weird. But my husband actually lives overseas, so he couldn't hack it. Yeah, so he lives in Panama. I stayed in the UK mainly because I don't like the way that his employers look after the accompanying partners. That's not something I'm going to go into here, but I don't want to be a part of that game anymore. Plus, being back here allows me to collect more animals. So. But no, I don't even want to go on a plane for a holiday. My holidays now are London. I've just come back from my sort of twice yearly trip to London, where I absolutely cram everything in. Theatres, parties, all sorts. Brilliant. London is my soul city. And I don't actually want to go on a plane again.
Okay.
Too much hassle. Too much hassle.
I mean, you lived your fair bit of it, so I suppose
Yes,
it's also
and
okay
I
to say until
yeah,
here, no? Like,
and I did a hell of a lot of travelling beforehand. I've
mm,
backpacked around South America. I've backpacked around Southeast Asia. I've worked in America. I've worked in Europe. I've worked in the Solomon Islands and Australia. I've done it all. I don't want to sit on a plane for 12 hours listening to people cough and babies cry.
yeah, that's the worst part of planes, I agree. And the waiting hours in the airport also, like, I
Yeah,
cannot. I
yeah,
hate that
that's
also.
another part of it. Get there 2 hours before and we'll delay your plane for 4. So
Cool. So yeah, just to close a little bit this first part, I would like you to ask a couple of recommendation questions. I know it's very difficult now because you have lived in quite so many countries, so
ah,
some of it it's making remind backs, but the other also it's like, okay, I don't know if you want to really compare food from one place or to the other, for example, but um, yeah, the first question it would be like favorite food from countries that you lived in, like.
yes, I was. Those are the questions that threw me. I have to say, because it's to me it's so long ago. I've slept since then, but it would have to be sashimi, any kind of sashimi, not sushi. Sushi you can, but sashimi is incredible, and it does put people off because it's raw fish, but the texture is brilliant. But frankly, anywhere you eat in Japan is amazing. And it is really accessible. I personally think it's accessible. I can't recommend anywhere in Germany or anything in Germany. It's no secret that I didn't enjoy it there. But in Africa, all the food was amazing. It's
Okay.
so much fresher than the UK. It tastes it. I thought the prices were excellent, and yeah, the food in Africa, I think, was the way that food used to be in the old days.
Oh, nice. So traditional stuff, but like fresh
Well,
and like
yeah, I mean,
prop-
I'm a carnivore, so fillet steaks in Africa. Yeah.
cool. What about drinks?
Yeah, that's not
Any?
one that I can answer. So, I don't drink now, and I can't think of any, because anything that I did drink back then, I can't remember. But drinks are kind of the same all around the world. You have a lager, it's kind of the same. I
No, I
don't
was
drink.
just
Yeah.
wondering, I don't know, Africa might have a different, like, I don't know, the kind of mate, for example, from Argentina, like, or from,
Oh, yeah, mate. No, I can recommend mate in a very small place near Ica in Peru.
hmm.
Rocket fuel. Um, no, well, they have this Africa. It's called amarula. It's
Hmm.
a it's a bit sweet, but apparently the elephants like to eat the fruit and get drunk.
Oh, really?
Which I'm not sure if that is true, but yeah, amarula is the African drink.
It would be funny to see an elephant drunk. I've never seen that actually. Like,
I'm not sure. I think it would be scary. They were one of the few animals that
yes,
were
very big.
disturbingly scary.
What about the music? Are you a music person at all? Like, do
Oh,
you
I'm a
still listen?
huge yeah. Music is a massive, massive part of my psyche. I
Okay.
but I couldn't actually tell you band recommendations.
Okay.
I mean, in Japan, I saw the Red Hot Chili Peppers and I saw the Who.
Ooh, cool.
In Berlin, I saw a violinist called David Garrett. Um, and in Pretoria, we saw Iron Maiden in a
Ooh,
field, which were brilliant because
wow.
they were one of the first bands I ever saw. And so yeah, music to me is massive, and I I can't be without music. And yeah, I do have a memory of an amazing busker, if you like, in Japan on a road called Omotesando, where they were
Mm.
playing their, I don't even know what they're called, which is embarrassing. I should have done my homework. So playing native instruments. And it was incredibly haunting and very beautiful. And
Nice.
So
I would say one last question. It would be if you had any secret spot or place that in the places where you live that you say, okay, these I would like to share. If you're feeling that you don't want to share it and you don't want to overwhelm the place, I totally understand it also.
well, it's too long ago for Japan, and Japan changes really quickly. I could take my daughter to school in the morning, have a coffee with my girls, come back, and a house that was on the corner would have been demolished. So Japan changes really quickly. My old home doesn't exist anymore. They
Okay.
kind of condemned it after the earthquake. So places that I remember from Japan probably aren't there anymore. But anywhere is incredible in Japan. Berlin, we lived in an area outside of the city centre called Grunwald, which had the most amazing woodlands and lakes around. So they're not secret, but just walk, find woods, go inside. You can find yourself a secret spot away from any crowds and just watch water for a while. When it comes to Africa, because you can't really go out and about on your own, you have to drive somewhere. My absolute two favourite spots, they're not secret, they're two safari parks within driving distance. One's called Rietvlei, which is within Pretoria, and it has animals. Took the dog for a walk and we met a zebra. She wasn't impressed. And the other one is Palanisberg, which is the most amazing wildlife area because it's contained within a very ancient but very huge volcanic crater. So it's got a natural barrier around.
Ooh.
And because it's smaller than Kruger, I mean anything smaller than Kruger, you get to see and experience the most amazing wildlife. They've got them all. They've got the big five and the little five and everything in between five. But a day at Palanisberg, absolutely. But stay in your car. Somebody got killed a couple of weeks ago by not staying in their car.
Oh gosh. Okay, stay in the car. It's a good recommendation.
Yeah, they're not pets. They're not pets. Go and pat the elephant.
Lions are not big cats. Yeah.
No, it is the way that I will die. Here, kitty, kitty.
I think I skipped the question about restaurants, but I don't know if you really have responses because it's years ago, so it's complex to respond that. So yeah,
it is. I did look up before, and they don't seem to exist anymore. So
no. Things change. Unfortunately, I think COVID also struck pretty hard in a lot of senses and locals and everything. So cool. Well, with that said, I would say I think we were already starting to go into the direction of explaining a little bit. So I would say we can go directly to the second part of the episode.
Hey there, everyone. If you're loving this episode so far and you want to stay tuned with other expat experiences, make sure to hit the subscribe button and follow our podcast so you never miss an episode. On top of that, we are now offering one-on-one calls to help you kickstart your own YouTube channel, launch a podcast, or navigate the journey of becoming an expat. Whether you are dreaming of sharing your story with the world or just need some guidance on your expat adventure, we've got you covered. Check the product section on our website, expatexpertspodcast.com, or check the link in the description and book your session today. With that said, let's go back to the episode.
The Expert, helping parents move abroad.
So as I already said a little bit in the introduction, you have multiple projects going around. One of them, I think the oldest one, it's the expatchild.com website. Then it came the podcast, then it came the club. Basically, the whole concept around it's helping parents with expat children.
It's helping expats.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone tells you to niche down. So I niched down, but now I'm niching out. So it evolves, just like life, just like parenting. my expat suite, I suppose, if we're going to go posh, the expat suite has expanded to encompass as many people as I can. So it started off with expat child, you're quite right. And I started that in 2012. So we moved from Berlin. So we moved from Japan to Berlin. And it took a year to recover, frankly. Sorry. And I could not find anything online on how to help my daughter with the anxiety that she was experiencing before we moved, before the earthquake. Take the earthquake out of the picture. So there was just nothing to find apart from horror stories about moving overseas with your children and how it damaged them for life and created third culture kids who had no roots and ended up in therapy for many years. So there was nothing that a stressed mother could read and easily understand, because it was all sort of coach speak and lots of words in a sentence that mean nothing. So I couldn't really find anything. So I turned to normal parents, in the UK. How would you explain? And got some sensible. So, helped a little bit. We had to move. And over the summer of 2012, we on holiday in Devon, and I started scribbling it all out into a notebook with the plan of writing a book. And while I was in Japan, I was a freelance writer, so I was doing a lot of writing, and I was also blogging with what ended up as a very popular website, because I was live blogging throughout the earthquake. My personal blog kind of turned into something else, and I sort of missed that, but I was totally burned out by the time I got to Berlin. Didn't want to write ever again. But by 2012, I'm going to write a book. There. I want instant gratification. I know what I'm like. I can fiddle around with chapters for years. I'm going to write a website. And because I was still missing my magazine, Expat Child was originally set up a bit like a magazine. So not a chronological personal blog, but information. And it kind of took off. It went a bit nuts. Got interviewed by all sorts of newspapers within a month or two of it going live, and off it went. So, yeah.
Cool. Very nice. Yeah. It takes some time sometimes, or to click the correct button and then suddenly everything skyrocks very fast. No, it can happen very fast, these kind of things. I think one of the part that you said, it was really interesting, that the fact that everything was probably written in a negative way, or it was like all horror stories, as you put it.
Stories, yeah.
You wanted also, was part of the objective of writing the website in a way that it wasn't always scaring people, but actually it was more okay, turn it around also from a positive perspective. You've been there and it wasn't that bad as other people were putting it. Or
I wouldn't say there was that much strategy involved. But it was more of a case of plain English. I need to write plain English, and I need to write informative articles that aren't all fluffy fake psych speak. And, it's sort of like, okay, well, I'm doing my packing now, so let's document what I'm doing. And this is what culture shock is, and then sort of researching to find out how to prepare children. So at the time, I'll be honest, it was trailblazing. I was the only one that did this. And of course, once a bandwagon starts, everyone jumps on board. So it's a bit like Alice running to stand still after a few years. But yeah, no, it was purely as an information. This is what oh, this is what I've learned from first day of school tips, and this is what I've learned about what happens with a kid with culture shock and how they express it, but put into a format that
Was it
other people.
much coming from a personal thing or from your own personal experience, or you were also like trying to do like research, like trying to interview other parents who were outside, or like, I don't know, friends of yours that had children
Yeah,
at that point of time?
there's a bit of personal experience, but due to I suppose my background, my personality, my skills, it became more of a research project to find out how other people, and then sort of mixing it all into one and extrapolating a generic. Because what I wanted to make sure was it could apply to anybody from any country going to any country. When I was first searching for support, I was just finding, where's the best mother and child place in this particular canton in Canada? Or in this street in Austria, where can I go and get a decent coffee? It was too precise. It wasn't important. Yeah. So, yeah, it was deliberately, the only deliberate part of it was making it general. So for anyone going to any country, because you can't possibly know everything about every country in the world.
No, that's for sure impossible. But at the end, like, I don't know, maybe in your case, you wanted to give general information. I suppose there's people who specialize on, no, I want to give information about Greece and how Greece works, and that's okay also. But
exactly, yeah, and they have teams and they're specialized in that. And but yeah, that was the reason.
What about team-wise? You always did it alone? It has been always a solo project, or like you had other people involved?
No, it's always been me. I've had people guest expert, write, especially when I was moving. I'd sort of put a call out, and because everybody wants to get their name out there, so I had lots of offers of, I'll write while you're moving. So that was cool. That gave me a whole different aspect to it as well. So yeah,
it's always nice to have people around also that are willing to do that. What about the podcast? When does that happen? When did you decide I want to do a podcast?
Okay, so Expat Child kept going and going and going, and then we were in Africa, and Expatability was born for a different reason, and it was more of a way of gathering all sorts of different articles that have appeared on Expat Child into one site. So that became Expatability, because my brain goes, we need a new one. So that's what that did. And then moved back, and I started making offers for one-to-ones and support and things when I got back in 2018. But the Expatability Chat podcast started in the middle of the pandemic. Everyone was saying, you've got a nice voice. My voice sounded different. I'll explain why in a minute. So everyone was saying, you need to do a podcast. You need to do a podcast. All right, I'll do a podcast. So I started doing a podcast because so many people were moving back in such difficult circumstances during the pandemic. They didn't know if this was the end of the world at the beginning of it. They were moving back home to be with their family, but within a couple of weeks they were, oh my God, why are we here? So the first one was about repatriation, and it kind of went on because, as I say, all of these articles, there are over 400 articles on Expat Child, and some of them are about the same topics. So the podcast was a way of me bringing them into one episode with some extra research that have, sort of grown up over the years. So I started doing the podcast, as I say, in the middle of the pandemic, because I got bored with making banana bread and needed to be out of the way. So
this podcast is also a pandemic child, so I will not say anything about that.
I'm glad it's not just me. That is brilliant.
Oh, no. Actually not. Like, I had an interview last week, and she has another podcast called Expat Podcast, and she also started during pandemic. I think there was a lot of people starting podcasts during pandemic, so don't worry.
Yeah.
The difference is who is still alive and who is Who of these podcasts is still recording, which is also a whole
That's
different
very
topic.
true, because I'm not. Because in 2022, I had to have an operation on my throat and managed to do a few more episodes for in 2023, but that was it. It was too much. So I stopped recording my podcast in 2023. I still get emails. Can I be on your podcast? Go and have a look. But because the topics are evergreen, they'll still be useful. The only ones that aren't are, being, sympathizing with people during the pandemic and such, and talking about the pandemic. But in general, they're all evergreen. So, yeah, so the podcast was a thing to reach different people, and, people who prefer to listen rather than read. So it was an interesting experiment.
For you, it was like putting pieces together, like our different articles from these 400 impressive articles that you had in there, but also doing a little bit more research. You also interviewed people, like you also did the guest episodes?
Only about 3 or 4, because it was my intention that it was me.
Makes sense.
That's one of the few things I've had strategy with. But it was a way of summarizing the many, many articles. So on a topic of choosing a school, there's probably 15 articles that just appeared into one episode. So
nice, very cool. What about the Expatability Club itself? When it comes, is that the part where it comes more like coach related? Is that when it comes and because I know you have like master classes now, you're doing also one-on-one calls with people. Like, is all of that coming through that?
Master classes, yeah, kind of. Master classes are the most commonly asked questions that I have on one-to-one calls. So it was expat guilt for a while. And then, should I stay or should I go? And those are the main ones. So they just get recorded and then they're uploaded. The Expatability Club is undergoing a lovely new, a reincarnation, if you like, because I'm moving out of Expat Child. My child's left me and gone and grown up and stuff. And so I don't want to talk about children anymore. No, that's not quite the case. But I want to expand. And because life changed for so many people over COVID, and so many people now work from home, and they've seen the other side. They want to work from anywhere. So I'm helping create location independence and move abroad. And so I can do the whole move abroad thing, and I can do the whole location independence, bring them all together into the Expatability Club. And it's an information and advice hub club membership. So that's what the current focus in life is. I should do one for Expat Pet, shouldn't I?
Oh yeah, you should definitely. I mean, you have experience with it, so that's the next niche to explore.
They changed rules too much. So yeah, it's the club is a sort of a distilling again of all of the information and insight that I've had over the years that I've got, plus extras from incredible experts in their field, and a chance to talk with me one-on-one and get my advice and info without coming on a one-to-one call with me. I need to protect my time. I need to protect my voice, and doing one-to-ones is very intense. So they're safe, for other people. Makes
sense. Very nice. So that's the project that opened a little bit the niche that you were saying. No, not.
That's right. Yeah, not just parents anymore. What I was finding was it did start off with parents and about their children, but then also expat partners. those of us who move overseas as a trailing space. We hate that phrase, but it's the one that gets used. So we quite often have to give up our jobs, our careers, to support our other half. And sometimes the company that they're working for are great, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they offer you a job, sometimes you're not suited to working for them. And it can be quite a shock to the system and to identity. You're just sort of, bit of a +1 is the new phrase I've heard, which I'm throwing around all over the place. So, yeah. So it started moving to expat partners. And now anybody who wants to move overseas, anybody who wants to be, van life, digital nomad, all this sort of stuff. So.
Cool. And I will ask one last question probably, so we can close this section also. And it would be like, how does a day for you look like with all these products? Like, what do you do like normally with it? Are you really like spending time writing articles for one or the other? How is your normal day like?
No, I don't write articles anymore. So Expat Child, it wasn't paused. I mean, it's all still incredibly relevant. I'll update every now and again and republish and so on. I don't record any podcasts anymore, and everything else kind of ticks over. I mean, automations are incredible for social media. And yeah, I don't have an average working day. I've written down in answer to your, how does a work day look for you? Herding cats.
Paradise? Where do I need to sign in?
Yeah, so it isn't something that I'm not very good at blocking out time and having a set day. I sort of have certain things that I do every week, twice a week, whatever. But it's not even reactive. It's I'll have meetings planned, and I'll have meetings with my mentors planned, and that's about as far as I go. And then I'll just sort of respond to emails, or I'll have a brainwave of something. But I'm not actually producing content for the website or the podcast anymore. And those were the real time sucks. And they had to be released into the wild for the sake of my sanity. But because they're evergreen, because they're evergreen, they're valid and they're relevant. So just a few tweaks here and there, and they work on their own. So they don't need updating much.
Cool. Then with that, I think the last question, it's always more or less the same. I suppose you responded a little bit about it. Whoever is interested on checking the Expatability podcast, it's out there. The Expat Child articles, the whole website, it's out there. So for whoever it's interested in this, it's still available, and it will continue to be available. But right now, your focus is a little bit more in the Expatability Club. So I suppose that would be the place to find you if someone wants to find you around.
If people want to find me, just search online. For my name, I am everywhere. Or you can email me at hello@expatability.net. Hopefully that comes across okay on the sound. But yeah, just search for my name. You'll find me. There's only one of me. So.
Well, with that said, thanks a lot. Thank you very much, Carole, for taking the time and the boys to take 1 hour of your time, and your boys to come back to the podcast scene a little bit for a certain amount of time. It has been a real pleasure to have you. It's a very incredible story.
It's an honour to be here, and it's so much more fun answering questions than trying to think of my own things. It's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Expat Experts, the podcast that takes you around the world through the stories of those who've lived it. Subscribe now to YouTube and your favourite podcast platform, and stay tuned for more inspiring interviews.